I'll try and either repeat something or speak up. So just a quick introduction. Working for quite a few years in a number of different ways with people, really focused around behavioral health. And I've been using coaching as the foundational approach to working with people to help them bring about behavior change in relation to, what we call behavioral related health conditions. And so that really means that group of problems that sort of span from anxiety and depression through to severe mental health difficulties and addiction. And in that time, my work has grown to change. Really, it's what I realized was that there was a really big correlation between the way that we were approaching coaching people with behavioral health issues and the approaches we were using lined up consistently over time, over the last, I would say, 10 years, with developments in neuroscience, developments in research into behavioral change and behavioral psychology. And where this brought me to was a real passion for integrating health in all its different aspects into the coaching role and the coaching engagement with another person, if you're a coach. And as Vicky said, I've now partnered with the AOeC to bring this approach and integration into executive coaching practice. So that's the big picture. The focus of today's webinar is, as you know, sleep. And we're going to be looking at how sleep can be sort of perceived as an ally or an enemy, as the title says, in your coaching practice. And I'm going to try to click onto my next slide. There we go. There's me, as we don't have video, that's me on the page. And we're interested in looking at sleep in a coaching environment. Now, when we think about the actual practice of coaching, what we're really doing is thinking about how is the relationship, the coaching relationship, changing the clients. On the left, a coach, and on the right, a client who's got his hands up and talking away. Now, we've got his brain lit up there in purple. Hope you can see it clearly. And behind the client, we've got illustrated some of the inputs that our approach to thinking about the way that health interacts with coaching practice is relevant to the coaching conversation. And you can see there we have the top right, the one we're going to be talking about in a minute, sleep. The tree represents rest and relationship with nature. Cycling represents exercise. The inevitable food and drink there, both non-alcoholic and alcoholic. Such issues as travel as it relates to lifestyle, hence the jet. And of course, the two people dancing at the bottom really are there to symbolize relationships, which could include family. So it obviously doesn't help for us to start thinking about all of the things that influence our client's brain. Now, we're not going to go into all of those today, and firstly, because it's a very large subject, and it is important to say that all of these things interact and interlock. So although we're going to zoom in on sleep today, none of these things are sort of solely segmented in one place. And so we can't really look at them as if the other ones don't exist, although we're going to focus on sleep today, because otherwise we would be here for a very long time. So, sleep. So there's, I think it's pretty safe to say that at the moment, sleep is a pretty topical topic, has been for quite some time. There's been a lot of few books out recently. I've just read a couple of new ones one of which is by a man who I will quote a couple of times today, Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. You've probably seen it in the bookshops. Sleep seems to matter, and the research really is showing us something quite astonishing, which is that sleep actually matters a lot more than we are accustomed or inclined to believe. Very quickly, we're going to look at it from a deficit point of view, which is what happens if we don't have enough sleep, or we don't have sleep of sufficient quality. So we just want to think of sleep in those two ways. And if some of this is running over material that you already know, please bear with me. I'm going to go quite quickly. But it's good for us to recap. Now, this isn't a definitive list, but it pretty much covers the main bases of impact that research has shown us. So, and pretty straightforward, really: decreased performance and alertness, memory and cognitive impairment, reduction of resilience, development or increased levels of stress in relationships, an overall poor quality of life, which might be a lack of ability to participate in things. Actually, occupational injury is more likely if you're sleep deprived, as indeed having a car accident is much more likely if you are driving and sleep deprived, or if you are being driven by somebody who's sleep deprived. And then there are the inevitable health conditions that we're all familiar with, such as obesity, heart disease, and diabetes, and so on, which are all indicated, are all mapped into sleep patterns, sleep deprivation, or low sleep quality. Last but not least, of course, mental health issues, anxiety and depression. So there's a really strong correlation between mental health and sleep, going in both directions. That's bi-directional, so which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So it's probably a good idea as well for us to not just look at all the bad stuff, but we can look at the benefits of appropriate sleep. And they're really sort of, if you like, the other side of that street. So people who sleep well, who have good sleep habits, get enough of the right quality, have lower chances of development of disease, they're better at managing stress, they have better mental well-being, they actually have a measurable, better immune system, wards off things like heart disease. Who knew increased fertility and sleep increases sex drive, which, if that's relevant to you, is important to many people. So, against that background of sleep being, good sleep being beneficial, and sleep deprivation or low quality of sleep not being so good for us, we come back to thinking about, well, why would we want to be really interested in this from the perspective of executive coaching? Now, this diagram represents the coaching, and it's not an entirely complete picture, but I've just kept it really as simple as we can to think about what is happening in the dynamic of a coaching relationship. So obviously, on the right-hand side, we have our client, who's represented by the lit up brain. And when we think about when people come to a coaching assignment, they come to be a client, what we want to be thinking is, whatever this client wants, and clients always come with coaching objectives, whether those coaching objectives are being somewhat mandated by the organization they work for, or whether those coaching objectives develop through your working with them, or perhaps they even arrive clearly with them already in their minds. What is going to make it possible for them to achieve those objectives is going to be their ability to change, their ability to actually move from where they are now to where they want to be, because of course coaching objectives are always the outcomes of a change process. Nobody can bring about increased levels of, for instance, performance, develop creativity, change their leadership style and skills without bringing about a correlating change in the way they behave, which of course comes out of the executive seat of command, which is the brain. So ability to change is important. And that means that we're interested in what impacts positively or negatively on the ability to change. And that, of course, is part of the reason that we're talking about sleep. So in this coaching relationship, the client brings some level of ability to change that is hopefully going to be what will bring about their coaching objectives, and the coach will bring their ability to coach. So on the left-hand side, their skills, their confidence, their experience, and so on. So the coach brings that, and the client brings the ability to change, and providing that they are compatible, and compatibility is of course relevant in a coaching relationship, they will be able together through the coaching partnership be able to develop the coaching objectives and have outcomes, also known as success, coming out from that. So that's the scenario that we're involved in. As we said before, or I said before, we're interested in what the brain can do and the brain's health, and we are pretty clear from earlier on that list of the impacts of sleep deprivation that lack of sleep or low quality sleep will have a negative effect on the brain. So whilst you are standing there in your coaching conversation, or indeed sitting, or maybe on the end of a phone, depending on how you do it, you are, of course, going to be having your coaching engagement affected by the sleep that your client is experiencing. Now, as I said before, it's not just sleep that's going to be affecting brain function. There are many other factors involved as well. But sleep is a very, very powerful moderator of ability to function. So how do we bring this into our coaching conversation? How do we, on a practical level, introduce it with our clients? I'm going to just go through the main points here that are important for us to think about, and certainly as the ones that I use when I'm looking to bring something like this into a coaching conversation. First thing would be, we have to include it in the coaching agreement. Now, typically, it can be, if you're working with a new client in a way, it can be easier to bring it into the coaching relationship, because a few sessions be developing a relationship, reaching agreements about how it's going to work, what the expectations are, what the goals are, the coaching outcomes required, and so on. If it's an existing coaching relationship where this kind of topic has never really been seen as important, or may not have even been mentioned, you will need to go back into that coaching relationship and agreement and bring it up specifically. But what you want to be doing is establishing sleep as a relevant factor in performance improvement, goal attainment, and behaviour change. And I've put all those specific things out there because there are, as I know, many reasons why we have a coaching assignment. Whether we're employed by the company to coach someone because they have some objectives for that person that they want you to coach them to, or it could be some other reason. It could be leadership development and so on. But pretty much it's a broad range. Your coaching assignment will fit in there somewhere, and you can include sleep awareness in that coaching agreement. And what I would be doing here is saying to my clients, I would be, being very transparent about why I think it's important that this becomes included in the coaching agreement. If it's somebody that you've been coaching already, you may already, from the work that you've done with them, have some insight into how they live, what their lifestyle is, the pressures that they're under, and so on. And you may well have some idea about their relationship to sleep. So step one is included in the relationship agreement. Then, of course, you want to establish their current awareness about sleep, which means asking them to talk about it, and covering their experience of it, their views about it, and their relationship to it. So this is really the where are you now kind of approach around sleep. And it gets the client's awareness onto sleep itself as a specific topic. The next, and one of the most important and useful aspects of this is the information gathering. And what you can do here is make an assignment request to get your client to actually track their sleep against performance indicators. So performance indicators would be obviously things like their own perception of their ability to fulfill tasks that they have, reach goals that they have, both in work environment, they feel they're being on a daily basis, with managing relationships, giving guidance and leadership if they are responsible for leading teams or in a managerial position or leadership position. All those kinds of things need to be tracked against the sleep. And we have a form which Vicky will send out in the follow-up, which is a form you can use, or you can adapt it if you want to add or remove things to it. But we'll send that out to you as a PDF. So make an assignment request and have them start actually looking at their relationship to sleep. How much sleep are they getting and what quality it is? And the details of that are captured on the form. After that, maybe at 1 or 2 sessions later, depending on how often you're speaking with your client, you would follow up about their sleep and discuss and really see what's come up for them about what they've noticed by going through the information gathering period. Whether their sense is that their sleep is okay, whether they're noticing relationship to when they seem to be getting enough sleep versus not getting enough sleep, and what impact that is having on the other, life indicators around them. And then, of course, it would be a decision that needs to be made in the coaching conversation about, is there any action that's needed? i.e., does the sleep need improving, or is it perfectly adequate? It's very hard to say. There isn't really any clear data about how likely it is that sleep will be an issue. In my experiential practices, anecdotal professional practice, I would say sleep is a factor in about 70 to 80% cases. So 7 to 8 out of 10 clients, sleep, some action around sleep is needed. And of course, some of the obvious places where that sleep runs into problems, of course, as I'm sure you know, is going to be around things like use of devices, phones turned on late at night in bedrooms, uses of screens, and so on. Quite often people have a fairly good baseline of sleep, but it's being nibbled away at, should I say, by things like devices and phones and that kind of thing. So whatever is required, agree some action. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you are keeping track of whether the action is improving the sleep and whether the client feels and can measure improvements in some of the other metrics that they're looking at. So that's really the steps that you need to take to bring this into the conversation. What will happen is if your client notices that they don't have very good sleep, or that there is some difficulty sleeping, either in quality or duration, it can be one of many, many different things. There are some environmental and behavioral issues that really stop good sleep. And this is a list. And we will be sharing these slides with you afterwards, so you don't have to remember all this. But things like bedrooms not being dark enough, there's too many glowing lights glowing there. Things like late night exercising, drinking alcohol, smoking, room temperature, caffeine levels, all of these things are impacting potentially on people's ability to get into and stay in the right kind of sleep. So environment is significant in terms of getting yourself into a sleepy, cueing yourself into good sleep. And also behaviors like drinking caffeine and so on, or smoking or drinking alcohol, are potentially going to have an impact. So if you have a client who smokes, or you have a client who drinks a lot of coffee, there's going to be some fairly obvious places where they can look to improve their sleep. Then, of course, there are health issues, and stress, anxiety, and depression and mental health problems. Well, as I mentioned earlier on, one of the problems that we have with sleep is that there's a kind of revolving door syndrome that can happen, where inadequate sleep can lead to higher levels of anxiety and depression and stress. And higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression can lead into difficulty sleeping. So what happens? You get into an unvirtuous circle of feeling anxious, not being able to cope. That troubles your sleep, which in turn makes your ability to cope and feeling anxious worse. But there are a lot of other things as well. So mental health problems, here's a list, and you can see there's quite a few things on. And of course, inevitably, we all know that sleep patterns change with aging, and sleep problems are indicated in obesity as well, which means that it isn't the case that sleep deprivation causes obesity, but it's certainly a significant factor. People eat more if they're sleep deprived, being one of those factors. In aging, it's popular to think that as you get older, you need less sleep. There isn't any research, mainstream research, across a number of different population groups that support that. Basically, one of the problems that older people face is that they are constantly finding it harder to get good quality sleep. But pretty much, irrespective of your age, except when you're a young teenager, the average amount of sleep that you need is pretty much the same throughout your adult life. Then, of course, there are a number of prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications, which are used to treat some of these health issues, and they also can impair sleep quality. So that can be an issue. So in working with people, coaching them around sleep, what I've heard over the years, and you may well have noticed it as too, is there are some fairly common resistances to the issue of sleep, and why people sort of resist the idea that they should get more sleep, and that there's some kind of cultural reasons around that, and there's some very practical ones. Now, the practical ones, people get anxious about the loss of time. Quite often you say to people, what would it be like to, for you to get 7.5 hours or 8 hours good quality sleep a night? And they feel that might interfere with their ability to meet their commitments. And this really speaks to the fact that so many people have workloads that are very heavy, and if that's combined with family life, particularly with children, travel for work and so on, they can just feel overwhelmed, and the idea of trying to find more time to sleep seems really impossible. Lack of support at home and the workplace. So quite often you'll find couples where they both of them are working really hard, particularly if both have careers of a certain kind, and they are both short of sleep. And it's very difficult for someone who's trying to change their sleep pattern and get more, to find support for it. Quite often it's perceived as a waste of time. You know, that phrase, "you can sleep when you're dead," which I'm ashamed to say I used to use, admittedly quite a few years ago, whenever I, you know, sort of felt that I ought to be asleep. I used to say to myself, "Listen, you can sleep when you're dead. There's so many exciting things to do in life." But as we're going to see on the next slide, that there's a rather sobering thought about that. We'll come back to that. Then there's some sort of judgmental things about the connection between sleeping and laziness. I don't know if you remember when you were a teenager, adults coming along saying, "Oh goodness me, well, you know, just lying around lazily in bed till after lunch," that kind of thing. So there is correlation with that, which people often carry around with them. There's what I call the sort of, you know, the kind of urban myths, or the myths of successful people, that sort of successful people somehow only sleep 4 hours a night. And I call that the Maggie Thatcher argument. For a long time, it was, you know, Margaret Thatcher was held up as a sort of, you know, icon of the work ethic. And, you know, guess what? She, you know, didn't really sleep very much, apparently. So people often hold that as a kind of belief and feel that to sleep a lot more would somehow mean that they moved out of a group of successful people into a group of less successful people. Then, of course, workplace culture. People say, well, it's all very well to say, but, you know, my company demands so much of me, there's just no way that I've got any more room to sleep. I'm hardly keeping up as it is. Then it's called a part of my leader persona. You know, it's again, it's for a lot of people, it's counterintuitive to be a leader of a team or CEO or top of a company, and sort of say, you know, yeah, I get a good 8.5 hours sleep a night. You know, for some people that you know, not having a lot of sleep is some kind of bad badge for them. So those are some of the common resistance. And just a quick point about the less you sleep, the shorter your life will be. That's a quote from Matthew Walker, the author that I mentioned earlier. Now, he's the director of the Center for Human Sleep Science at the University of California, Berkeley, and he wrote the book Why We Sleep, which I do recommend you read. And essentially, his research, and again, it's correlated with a lot of research from all sorts of sources, is that reductions in sleep shorten lifespan. And it's simply the case that if you take the view that you're shaving 3 hours a day off your sleep and using it to be awake, it is true to say that that represents about 1,095 hours a year. But of course, if it takes a year off your life, a year of your life, you know, after taking out 8 hours for sleeping, actually gives you 5,840 hours. And so, you know, my assertion in previous part of my life that I can sleep when I'm dead, the irony of it is, and it's an irony that's pointed out by Matthew Walker, is that if you don't get enough sleep, you sure will be dead earlier than perhaps you imagined. So there's really, if you think about it like that, you can see that sort of shaving your sleep off now on the grounds that you want to do more and live longer is actually counterintuitive. You'd be better off getting more sleep and, you know, living a little bit longer. And of course, the other thing is that if you get enough sleep, the quality of your life with good sleep is likely to be better. Now, this is all good information that you can share with your clients, and I certainly encourage mine who are interested in really upping their game performance-wise and so on, within the context of what does your brain need to get to the next level of performance and so on. You know, I would be suggesting that they read certain books. So another really important point about this, executive coaches are not explicitly trained as sleep coaches, are not experts in sleep. So just to be really clear, I'm not an explicitly trained sleep coach. There is such a thing. It's a very specialist training, but that's okay, because our job is not to I'm not proposing that we are going to be, or you might want to be, but or you might even be, for all I know, on this call or listening to this call, you may be an expert sleep coach. What I'm really proposing is that we get our clients and invite our clients to think about sleep as a component of how they are bringing about the reaching of their objectives. They're trying to do things in their lives, they're trying to improve, they're trying to fulfill their dreams, their ambitions, their roles, whatever it is, and they need some personal awareness. Now, what you can bring as an executive coach is you can bring your ability to integrate sleep into the conversation in a way that allows them to become experts on sleep for themselves. If we think about it, coaching objectives mean we want our clients to be experts about themselves more than we want to think that we are experts about them. Moving on, why a specialized sleep coach may be required. There may be one. Very quickly, client sleep. If a client sleeps if their sleep is very short over 6 months, that's a red flag. You would want to be suggesting they take a look at it with a professional sleep coach. If they've made efforts to change their sleep patterns and have failed, use of medication or recreational drugs which interferes with sleep, that would be something that I would be looking to refer them for. Flatlining of performance improvement along with short sleep. If you're working with someone and you don't seem to be getting anywhere, and you happen to know, or you found out through integrating sleep, that they are constantly tired and constantly struggling with getting enough sleep of the right quality, that correlation would lead me to want to suggest a referral. And possible health components that may correlate with sleep problems. So if a client has got specific health challenges, so for instance, heart or weight issues or anxiety, depression, whatever it is, that would, in order to work on their sleep, I would be suggesting that they go to a specialized sleep coach and need possibly another kind of support as well. How to refer, add a sleep. That's that list of people that you know have had a conversation with, are networked with, who you can refer clients to if you need to. Propose a referral to a client, let them select if they'll do it or whether they wish you to make a referral. And obviously you need to manage informing HR organization via existing contracts. So if you're going to do some specific specialized work on sleep over and above your coaching, you would want to be informing your employers or who's hired you, paying you, that was the case, and manage that together. And then coach the client into a referral session and integrate into ongoing coaching. So you want to be making sure that you are bringing back their experience about their sleep into your overall coaching session. Now we're going to talk a little bit quickly about, just looking at the time here, okay. We're going to just talk a little bit about why timing of coaching matters when it comes to sleep. And this is really a fascinating area. So if we think about the way that people function, you think about yourself, you probably know that you have times of the day when you kind of are on your game, as opposed to other times of the day where you don't feel so on your game. And interestingly enough, a lot of research has been done about that. And what we know is that, broadly speaking, we tend to be people that follow fairly similar patterns. So if you take population group as a whole and you look at the different times of day where they feel like they're more functioning, where their mental capacities are greater, their cognitive functioning is better, and so on, you see some very similar patterns. And it matters to us because when we engage with someone, when we coach someone, it is really relevant how they are in terms of, where they are in their fatigue cycle, where they are also in other cycles like nutrition and so on, blood sugar, and those kinds of things. Not that we're talking about those in this conversation, but certainly those kinds of things are always a factor. So when we think about when we're coaching someone, if we are always meeting them at the same time of day, for instance, that may not be suitable for them for optimal coaching. It may not also be suitable for you for being an optimal coach. So it's really important to think about this fact. Now, a few years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, perhaps, I tried unsuccessfully to have a coaching practice which started very early in the morning, because some clients get up very early and they're larks, as they say, people who like to get up early and who it suits them to get up early, and they wanted coaching. It's a complete failure, really, because I'm not a lark. I'm actually not a night owl either, which are the two of three broad groups of people. I'm kind of in the middle, which means that I'm not really firing all the cylinders at that time of day, and it's pretty difficult for me to bring all my attention to a client. So it didn't work out, and I now don't do that. But what you need to do in order to understand the relationship between a client's mood changes and fatigue changes, energy changes, is to vary your coaching meeting times. You need to involve them in the awareness of good times versus bad times. So we really want to sort of say, try to improve the client's awareness of when they are in an optimal condition in the day and when they might not be in such an optimal condition. Most people live in a sort of strange idea that they wake up in the morning, they get up, they sort of get up to speed, take off, and sort of run. Whilst that may be people's, dare I say it, self-delusion, it's not actually, evidenced by any of the data when people are studied across different times of the day. So bringing their awareness to this is really important. Match your best times with your client's best times, and that's coming up, so we'll come back to that in a moment. Match success in the coaching with the timing. If you find that the coaching is progressing better, your client is getting more out of it, there's more learning, there's more insight, there's more change with the way that you're managing your coaching timings, that will become evident, and then you want to see if you can keep that correlation going. The other thing, which is, I do think it's important, sometimes clients will resist this approach. They'll sort of say, well, the last coach I had always met me at 7 o'clock in the morning just after the gym or something. Why can't you? It's important to, if a client insists on that, then you're going to have it given to them. But it's important to not just roll over and say, well, okay, that's what we'll do then, because it may not be in their best interest. So in the last 5 or 10 minutes, we'll just quickly go through this. I mentioned timing before. This is actually a slide from another part of another presentation, another part of our program, which actually represents emotional balance. And I put it here to further hammer home this point about timing being crucial in terms of when you engage with a client. This is a composite graph which is taken from some very well-known research, which some of you might know, which is the diurnal seasonal mood variance with work, sleep, and so on. Essentially, the graph looks like that for pretty much everybody. You wake up in the morning, your emotion, this is related to positive, standardized positive mood, or which is called emotional balance. And it really represents how emotionally balanced we are across a period of time from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. And this graph is pretty consistent, and the research showed that this is pretty much the case for most people, which is kind of interesting because you can see it's very low at the beginning, peaks up sort of around the middle of in the evening, which means, and these charts just show us where, if you may be, where you have your coaching appointment, you are going to be meeting them at different points on that emotional balance scale. The same really applies with the approach to where they are around fatigue and sleep. So this is relevant to how we think about how we engage with our clients. Last but not least, all of this, of course, applies to us as coaches. And so in this diagram, what we're seeing, of course, is the other side of this street, which relates to the impact of sleep. Impact of sleep is having on you. You too, like I said before, I recognized through trial and error that it was a pretty appalling idea for me to start trying to do coaching very early in the morning. And you also will have your own kind of peaks and troughs and so on. And you also will be affected by all of those inputs. So our ability to conduct ourselves as coaches to the highest possible capacity of our skills and abilities and training, and therefore be, effective and useful and rehired by companies and organizations, is directly affected by all of the inputs that we have. So all of those things that I mentioned before, but in particular sleep. So timing is really important. Sleep is quite a factor in the way that your clients experience their lives, their overall health. And by integrating it into the coaching relationship, you will be helping them not step over something which a lot of people take for granted, particularly the not getting enough sleep. And you'll be helping them reach their goals more easily. So, is it an ally or an enemy? So the title of this quick webinar was to kind of pose that question. Essentially, it's both. If your client can move from, particularly if you're looking at performance coaching, or the idea of helping people do better in existing roles and improve their outcomes on existing workloads. If they have bad sleep, it can one of the most effective strategies from a coaching point of view is just helping your client improve their sleep. I've seen clients just thrive just because we put some attention on getting them some sleep, and they were able to actually get back on the horse, or stay more clean on the horse that they were on, which they wanted to be on, and did a lot better. The last point I'd just like to make about that is that the work that I've done in working with people, as I mentioned at the beginning, in behavioral health problems, so people, trying to recover from things like severe depression, disabling depression and anxiety. I'm not talking about mild levels where people are still functioning. People with alcohol dependency and drug dependency problems who needed a recovery program. Sleep is absolutely crucial in all those contexts, and there's a lot of evidence around relapse rates, for instance, for addiction, being correlated with poor sleep or sleep problems. So it's affecting pretty much everything, and I'm hoping very much that this webinar will have inspired you to take another look at the sleep with your clients, and also perhaps in your own lives. Just a quick wrap up on, I mentioned earlier, and Vicky mentioned at the beginning, that have a partnership with the AOeC. We have a 3-part program called Executive Coaching and Health, Coaching Skills for Wellness, Recovery and Performance, which is broken up into 3 parts. Part 1 is a self-directed learning module, and that's available through the AOeC. And we also have parts 2 and 3, which are intermediate and advanced levels. All the details are on the website, and you can find out more about that by contacting the AOeC and Mandy. Golly. And Vicky, are you there? Probably unmuting yourself.
Yes, hi.
Okay,
Yeah.
Good. All right. We're 8 minutes away from the top of the hour, so I think we're in fairly good shape. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them, or comments.
Hi, I just have a comment. This is Angela here, Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Hi, that was fascinating, by the way. I thought it was a really great presentation. And I guess I just it was great to think of it in the context of your client and also for yourself as a coach, and especially the optimal times where you'd like to coach someone. So you're in service of the client. I just wondered if there was any, if you had any examples to share in terms of when this has been brought into a coaching agreement and maybe there's been an unusual reaction. Because I was just thinking for myself, if I was asked that question, I might be a little bit hesitant initially as to how I would bring sleep into coaching, and if I was asked that question. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, or any examples of someone's reaction when they were asked about this.
You mean when they're the clients, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Well, as I said earlier, I think it's always easier if you're starting off a new coaching relationship, because when I, go and sit down with a client for the first time, one of the things I do is I tell them how I work. And one of the things I do is I explain that I work on what I call an all inputs are interesting basis, which means that anything that is affecting them, whatever that is considered relevant to our coaching objectives, because we want to really understand what might be influencing their ability to get from A to B. And obviously the assumption is always we're at A and you want to go to B, otherwise why are we doing coaching? And B is always, could be more of something, or, could be trying to tackle a new project or whatever it is. So when you have a new relationship, it's always easier because you can kind of put in the ground. It's a little harder if you've been working with someone from a while and you suddenly pop up and say, hey, I'd like to talk about sleep now because I suddenly think it's relevant. And I suppose managing, there is the having to manage that surprise that clients can have. But nevertheless, it's worth doing. I have had clients who literally just said, this just isn't relevant to me. I sleep fine. I don't want to talk about it. And I've had to respect that. I've had to say, that's fair enough. What I have discovered is, though, that there's a kind of sort of delayed reaction to that, because sometimes even just you having put it on the table and said, I think it could be something interesting. I've been listening, I've been working with you recently and for the last 3 months, and I've noticed that sometimes you seem to have struggled with fatigue and so on. And that's enough said. And sometimes you'll find that people will actually come back to that later on in the conversation, even if they don't grab it, straight away when you first mention it. So I would say, just place it in the coaching conversation with an existing client. If they if it doesn't seem to sort of appeal to them, they don't chime with it, don't push it, just leave it there. But increase your awareness really of any language that they're using when you're talking with them that might relate to fatigue and sleep. And that can just, they say, well, I got back from my trip on Sunday night, I was really tired, that kind of thing. That kind of language tells us something. We often can see, excuse me, there's something beeping. We often can see from what people are saying that they're sort of telling you that sleep's an issue without you going at it directly, if that makes sense.
Of course. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Claire Barlow here.
Hello,
just a point to note, and it's I'm sure it's on people's minds anyway, but I have a couple of clients that I coach that are from the Middle East, and we make a conscious decision to break the coaching process over Ramadan. It's not just sleep deprivation, but it's the whole lifestyle that they have during that period of time. So there's just a little bit of a diversity angle there, just to have in the back of your mind as well.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Claire. And I've also, worked in continental Europe, lived in Italy for a long time. They have different lifestyle there too. So
yes,
the siestas in the afternoon and so on. which I started doing myself actually, which was fantastic. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Back to you, Vicky.
Thank you ever so much, Anthony. Thank you so much for the talk today. I love sleep. I personally have no problem with sleep whatsoever. But it is only one health aspect that people can incorporate within their coaching, as you mentioned, and the course that Anthony mentioned is 3 parts. So you can go as little or as deep as you like. The first one is an online course, so you can do it as and when you choose to do it. So you can find details on the website. Anthony is partnering with us in long term, so we'll be doing future webinars. So keep a lookout for those. So I will be emailing and marketing details of them. We have another one coming up on the 11th of July. And as mentioned at the beginning, this has been recorded. So I will pop an email to everybody with a copy of this recording and the slides. Tomorrow morning it will probably be. So just thank you everybody for joining us today, and hope you found it useful. And thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. And thank you very much, Vicky.